I accept the Nobel Prize for Peace at a moment when 22 million Negroes of the United States are engaged in a creative battle to end the long night of racial injustice. I accept this award on behalf of a civil rights movement which is moving with determination and a majestic scorn for risk and danger to establish a reign of freedom and a rule of justice. I accept this award today with an abiding faith in America and an audacious faith in the future of mankind. Your Majesty, Your Royal Highness, Mr. President, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I accept the Nobel Prize for Peace at a moment when 22 million Negroes of the United States are engaged in a creative battle to end the long night of racial injustice. I accept this award on behalf of a civil rights movement which is moving with determination and a majestic scorn for risk and danger to establish a reign of freedom and a rule of justice. I am mindful that only yesterday in Birmingham, Alabama, our children crying out for brotherhood were answered with fire hoses, snarling dogs, and even death. I am mindful that only yesterday in Philadelphia, Mississippi, young people seeking to secure the right to vote were brutalized and murdered. I am mindful that debilitating and grinding poverty afflicts my people and chains them to the lowest rung of the economic ladder. Therefore, I must ask why this prize is awarded to a movement which is beleaguered and committed to unrelenting struggle, to a movement which has not yet won the very peace and brotherhood which is the essence of the Nobel Prize. After contemplation, I conclude that this award, which I receive on behalf of that movement, is a profound recognition that nonviolence is the answer to the crucial political and moral questions of our time. The need for man to overcome oppression and violence without resorting to violence and oppression. Civilization and violence are antithetical concepts. Negroes of the United States, following the people of India, have demonstrated that nonviolence is not sterile passivity, but a powerful moral force which makes for social transformation. Sooner or later, all the peoples of the world will have to discover a way to live together in peace and thereby transform this pending cosmic elegy into a creative psalm of brotherhood If this is to be achieved, man must evolve for all human conflict a method which rejects revenge, aggression, and retaliation. The foundation of such a method is love. The tortuous road which has led from Montgomery, Alabama to Oslo bears witness to this truth. This is a road over which millions of Negroes are traveling to find a new sense of dignity. This same road has opened for all Americans a new era of progress and hope. It has led to a new civil rights bill, and it will, I am convinced, be widened and lengthened into a superhighway of justice as Negro and white men in increasing numbers create alliances to overcome their common problems. I accept this award today with an abiding faith in America and an audacious faith in the future of mankind. I refuse to accept despair as the final response to the ambiguities of history. I refuse to accept the idea that the isness of man's present nature makes him morally incapable of reaching up for the eternal oughtness that forever confronts him. I refuse to accept the idea that man is mere flotsam and jetsam in the river of life, unable to influence the unfolding events which surround him. I refuse to accept the view that mankind is so tragically bound to the starless midnight of racism and war that the bright daybreak of peace and brotherhood can never become a reality. I refuse to accept the cynical notion that nation after nation must spiral down a militaristic stairway into the hell of nuclear annihilation. I believe that unarmed truth and unconditional love will have the final word in reality. This is why right temporarily defeated is stronger than evil triumphant. I believe that even amid today's mortar bursts and whining bullets, that is still hope for a brighter tomorrow. I believe that wounded justice, lying prostrate on the blood-flowing streets of our nations, can be lifted from this dust of shame to reign supreme among the children of men. I have the audacity to believe that peoples everywhere can have 3 meals a day for their bodies, education and culture for their minds, and dignity, equality, and freedom for their spirits. I believe that what self-centered men have torn down, men other-centered can build up. I still believe that one day mankind will bow before the altars of God and be crowned triumphant over war and bloodshed, and nonviolent redemptive goodwill proclaim the rule of the land, and the lion and the lamb shall lie down together, and every man shall sit under his own vine and fig tree, and none shall be afraid. I still believe that we shall overcome. This faith can give us courage to face the uncertainties of the future. It will give our tired feet new strength as we continue our forward stride toward the city of freedom. When our days become dreary with low hovering clouds, and our nights become darker than 1,000 midnights, we will know that we are living in the creative turmoil of a genuine civilization struggling to be born. Today I come to Oslo as a trustee, inspired and with renewed dedication to humanity. I accept this prize on behalf of all men who love peace and brotherhood. I say I come as a trustee, but in the depths of my heart I am aware that this prize is much more than an honor to me personally. Every time I take a flight, I am always mindful of the many people who make a successful journey possible, the known pilots and the unknown ground crew. You honor the dedicated pilots of our struggle who has sat at the controls as the freedom movement soared into orbit. You honor once again Chief Lutuli of South Africa, who struggles with and for his people are still met with the most brutal expression of man's inhumanity to man. You honor the ground crew, without whose labor and sacrifice the jet flights to freedom could never have left the earth. Most of these people will never make the headlines, and their names will never appear in Who's Who. Yet when years have rolled past, and when the blazing light of truth is focused on this marvelous age in which we live, men and women will know and children will be taught that we have a finer land, a better people, a more noble civilization, because these humble children of God were willing to suffer for righteousness' sake. I think Alfred Nobel would know what I mean when I say I accept this award in the spirit of a curator of some precious heirloom which he holds in trust for its true owners, all those to whom truth is beauty and beauty truth, and in whose eyes the beauty of genuine brotherhood and peace is more precious than diamonds or silver or gold. Thank you.
What did you discuss back in the hotel room?
Nothing, just friends, just like Khrushchev and Kennedy and everybody. When the people, all of the politicians of all other white races come together, and they, although they believe different, they think different, whites can come together and discuss the common cause. But whenever a few of us come together, the world is shook up. And I say, whatever went back there is our business.
Reverend King, do you agree?
Oh, yes. We had a very good discussion on many matters, and of course these are not things that we would discuss here, but we do have common problems and common concerns, and above all, as Muhammad Ali has just said, we are all victims of the same system of oppression, and even though we may have different religious beliefs, this does not at all bring about a difference in terms of our concerns.
Still brothers.
Do you share the same?
Man, another great day. Common Sense with Van Silk. Listen, today they're celebrating Martin Luther King's birthday on a Monday. But let's all be real, his birthday is his birthday, but the national holiday today. But I want to sit back, and this 11-year-old kid, when he was assassinated, didn't quite understood who this man was until I got older in life. And the same thing for Malcolm X. Learned about Marcus Garvey, a lot of the leaders, and especially the black leaders. And, you know, how the FBI wanted to tear Martin and Malcolm down and find faults and preempt things into the people's minds in judgment. For him to get the Nobel Peace Prize, that's awarded to him, not given to him. Or to see now today they're comparing a racist to Martin Luther King, which is unbelievable. Like, Charlie Kirk is the nowadays comparison to Martin Luther King. This is the world we live in. The sad part is that our own people are not teaching our kids about Martin Luther King and the respectability of Martin Luther King and what he really has done. It's just not about one speech of I Had a Dream. There was a whole caravan of them that was helping with the civil rights movement, man. You can go to Andrew Young, Ralph Abernathy. You know, it's a whole bunch of them. But Martin Luther King was put in the forefront. Our kids don't know no different. They don't know no better. Today they demoralize and defamating the characters of Martin Luther King and Malcolm X with the AI-generated photos and them eating pork and all this. And, you know, it's like, when are we going to put a step down to stop this carnage bullshit? But as we sit here with Common Sense with Van Silk, I want you to look at the biography of Martin Luther King and some of the few pieces that I pulled out, and also listen to his Nobel Peace Prize speech, something that I've never even listened to, but I'm listening to today. I'm going to say this: America loves great Americans. This is a great country. It's just the people that's in charge that mess everything up. Let's make a change. Make sure you register to vote, save our democracy, and listen to all you Martin Luther King debaters. Find another home. Common Sense with Van Silk.
Can you tell me what effect Martin Luther King's death has had on you?
Well, it shook me up pretty good.
You ashamed it happened in America?
No, it shouldn't have never happened anywhere.
What do you think of the violence that's occurred since in some of the cities?
Well, I don't know. It's hard to say. It's hard to say anything about it.
What do you think of Negroes?
Oh, I think they're just as good as any white people are.
You think they should have full equality?
They should, yes.
What would you...
Well, they're human, same as anybody else.
What would you do to help them get it now?
I'd do anything I could to help them.
Have you in the past?
I've been trying, yes, sir. I sure have.
They done killed Martin Luther King, and the only thing he kept singing was, "We shall overcome in love and peace." Killed him, wiped him out. Killed Malcolm. Wiped out everybody, man. Don't you understand? And some cat hired 3 black cats to wipe out the man who was the martyr of our time. And when they killed him, he had a half a church full of people. It wasn't like it was packed and jammed, because already he was losing. And he says it himself, if you read his works, that there's a whole bunch of niggers that don't like me. Black folks like me, but not the niggers. Which is true. And 3 niggers knocked him off. Paid by white establishment. That's my feeling, and I will feel this as long as I live. And it was afterwards that the resurgence of this man, and suddenly we became aware of all the things that he was saying. Because as long as, doesn't it strike you funny, that as long as Malcolm was preaching separatism, as long as he was preaching such vehemence, he never got hurt at all. It was when he came back from Mecca and he said, we must all live together. We must as black people do our thing, but we must all live on this earth as one, blah, blah. That's when he started getting his house bombed. He got wiped out months later. Same thing with King. As long as King was hitting the marches, they put him in jail. That was it. As soon as he started talking about Vietnam and the workers and this, that, and the other, getting out of his field of reference, really, heavy, too heavy for somebody. Wipe him out. You know, and it's frightening to me. So that's why I say a lot of people will not like any performer. And you try to relate, I'm not talking about relating in terms of, oh, hi, brah, and do the fist and whatever it is. And, hey, man, right on. I'm not talking about the words. I'm talking about in your heart, relating to what the problems are. But the society in which we live in today, it has gotten to a point where you cannot do that anymore, based upon the fact that I must do what I feel. If I feel that I want to help in this area, I try to do it, and I try to do it sans publicity. Not based upon the fear that I have for my job, but I think that sometimes if I want to help some brothers who are in trouble, my lending my name to it defeats the very purpose that they're trying to achieve. But money is money. Heart is heart. You should lend your heart and your money. And if you ain't got the money, then lend your body, man, to it, you know. But I'm talking about, I think that if the performer can be used, then he should be used. To put my obligation into black positive things. I'm not talking about national organizations. It can be something that's happening on the corner. A project that because I found out, and Walter Mason can tell you, we found out that you go into a town, and sometimes it's as little as $100, because you go to an area where some projects are, and they got a recreation center, ain't got no pool table, ain't got no records to play, so the kids don't go there, they hang on the corner, right? Jesus, you walk in and you look around and you say, hey, well, I know I can get a pool table, and I know I can get a record player, and I'll get Reprise at that time, or my own company.
Martin Luther King Jr. was a minister and leading activist during the 20th century civil rights movement. He was born Michael Luther King Jr. on January 15, 1929 in Atlanta, and later changed his name to Martin. King grew up steeped in religion and activism. His father was a reverend at Ebenezer Baptist Church and a local NAACP leader. A talented student, King skipped 2 grades in high school and entered Morehouse College at age 15. King was skeptical about Christianity as a boy, but later embraced his faith and entered the seminary. While earning a doctorate at Boston University, King met aspiring singer Coretta Scott. They married in 1953 and had 4 children: Yolanda, Martin Luther III, Dexter Scott, and Bernice. King established himself as a rising star in the civil rights movement. After Rosa Parks' arrest in Alabama in December 1955 for refusing to give up her seat to a white passenger, the NAACP chose King to lead the Montgomery bus boycotts. The protests ultimately led to a U.S. Supreme Court decision which outlawed segregation on public buses in Alabama. With civil rights demonstrations emerging all over the country, King helped organize the Southern Christian Leadership Conference to unite them. Inspired by Mahatma Gandhi, King advocated nonviolent protests like boycotts and sit-ins.
King's experience, passion for the cause, and position in the community gave him the credentials to become a leader in the 381-day boycott of the city buses. On December 20th, 1956, the Supreme Court ruled segregated buses to be unconstitutional. This was a major victory for the civil rights cause and proved King's nonviolent methods of protest could yield results. King was now the national face of the civil rights cause. He was jailed over 20 times, was once stabbed in the chest, his house was bombed, and he suffered relentless personal attacks on himself and his family.
One day I was crying profusely, and Mom picked us up from school and asked me, well, what's wrong? And I said, well, the kid said, Daddy's a jailbird. And she explained to me why he was going to jail, that he was really going to jail to make this world a better place for all of God's children. Well, the next day I came back to school with almost a new attitude, being proud of what my father was doing. It was the spirit of love that he exhibited that transformed a lot of lives.
We still have the attitude of love.
He used to say, I love everybody, I'm every man's brother. You may not love me, but that's your issue, not mine.
Dr. King inspired thousands of people through his eloquence and through his fearlessness, especially after his home was firebombed with his wife and his children. They showed through their courage that they were prepared to give their lives to the cause of freedom.
This was the home of Martin Luther King Jr. and his young family from 1954 until 1960. Martin Luther King pretty much said you had to do two things in order to be free. You have to forgive everybody for everything they've ever done to you, and number two, you have to lose your fear of death. He was over at Ralph Abernathy's church and taking up a collection the night the house was bombed, September 30th, 1956. Mary Lucy Williams and Mrs. King were in the living room. The baby Yolanda was in the master bedroom sleeping. And all of a sudden, Mrs. King hears a noise out front. So they ran down the hallway. That blast went off seconds later, and Dr. King said he didn't take a full breath from the time he left that church and got here and found out that his family was not hurt. But in the meantime, 300 to 500 angry black people are here. They have guns and knives and sticks and hoes and shovels and pitchforks. Amid that angry crowd that could have exploded any minute, this young preacher, who was a very, very special human being, came home. And it didn't take him any words to calm those people down. All he did was raise his hand, and it was kind of like, peace be still. Told his people to go home. He who lives by the sword will die by the sword, and we have to love our white brothers and sisters even though they're not loving us back. Go home. He said, God will take care of us. And that's exactly what the people did.
Martin asked us to be calm in the midst of all of the turmoil that was going on.
That was one of the greatest opportunities that he took advantage of. Tell your people not to flare up. Don't fight. We're all right. My family is not hurt. Go on home. And people did.
King worked tirelessly to promote the cause he so strongly believed in. And from 1957 through 1968, he traveled over 6 million miles, delivered 2,500 speeches, wrote 5 books, and dozens of articles. His hard work and ability to communicate earned him such respect that he earned the ear of President John F. Kennedy, who personally met with King. Of all the speeches King delivered, none has stood the test of time like his famous I Have a Dream speech. Symbolically delivered from the steps of the Lincoln Memorial in 1963, in front of 250,000 people, both black and white. King had become such a force in America that he was named Time Magazine's Man of the Year in 1963. A nice achievement indeed. But it paled in comparison when in 1964, he became the youngest man ever to win the Nobel Peace Prize.
Martin Luther King Jr. was an American. He was deeply American. And what's striking to me is that he had more confidence and faith in American democracy, in the Constitution, and in the principles of fairness and opportunity than nearly all of his critics.
King put his life on the line for many of his protests. A 1965 march for voting rights in Selma, Alabama, turned violent when police viciously attacked the protesters in a conflict dubbed Bloody Sunday. Ever determined, King led another Selma demonstration 2 days later. When the marchers reached a bridge blocked by state troopers, they simply knelt down in prayer. King and other leaders persisted, launching a third march days later under the protection of the Alabama National Guard and other marshals ordered by President Lyndon B. Johnson. The power of King's activism compelled Johnson to sign the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and the Voting Rights Act of 1965. As the Vietnam War intensified, King focused his movement on what he saw as the 3 major evils of racism, poverty, and militarism. By 1968, King had made many enemies and recognized he might not live to see the fruits of his labor.
While in Memphis to lead a protest march defending the rights of striking garbage workers in April of 1968, King delivered a rousing speech titled, "I've Been to the Mountaintop." It would be his last. Standing on the balcony of his second-floor room at the Lorraine Motel in Memphis, King was shot and killed
by James Earl Ray. King's assassination, however, could not erase his progress or his legacy.
We were watching, all of us, the evening news when it flashed across the screen and on April 4th, 1968, that he had been shot. As we went through the procession, there were so many thoughts that were going through my mind. We had all the emotions. Gosh, what are we going to do now? It was hard, but one of the things that I remember most prominently were the number of people that came into Atlanta, the thousands that came to pay respect. You know, when you see all of these people, you begin to start evaluating, wow, well, maybe what our father was doing is really very, very significant.
In 1983, Ronald Reagan signed a proclamation declaring the third Monday of every January Martin Luther King Jr. Day, a public holiday to celebrate the man and what he stood for.
The modern civil rights era of Martin Luther King is of vital importance, not just in history, but for today, because it shows America tackling a problem that nobody really thought it could handle. And it did that by an extraordinary collection of new heroes coming to the fore to move America forward in freedom. Here we are threatened again in America, and we always will be, with very difficult political problems ahead for our economy and the world ahead of us. And here's an example from the 1950s and 1960s of how America rose to just such a challenge, even though most people thought we couldn't do it. The hardest thing to include when you're trying to do succinct stories are the small stories of people who are not well-known historical figures, but who made a critical difference. The crippled lady with polio who was a cook in St. Augustine, Florida, who came forward when everyone else was too scared to march for freedom because they'd been getting beaten so badly on the streets of St. Augustine, Florida, our oldest city in America, founded 1565, but it was very violently segregated. And Dr. King's people could not find marchers. Well, this lady, Georgia Reed, stood up in the kitchen and said, I will lead the march on my crutches, but you have to take me home to change out of this cooking uniform, because if I'm going to jail, I'm going in my Sunday best. There are lots of people like that and stories that add up to the cumulative Birmingham March or Freedom Summer or the Selma March, or things that some people are familiar with as great historical turning points. The moments wouldn't have happened without the smaller foot soldiers.
This is Democracy Now! We end today's show with the words of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. on this federal holiday that honors the birthday of Dr. King. On April 4th, 1968, he was assassinated at the Lorraine Motel in Memphis, Tennessee. He was just 39 years old. He was in Memphis supporting striking sanitation workers as he built momentum for a Poor People's March on Washington. This is an excerpt from Dr. King's last speech, which he gave on April 3rd, 1968, known as the speech, "I have been to the mountaintop."
You know, several years ago, I was in New York City autographing the first book that I had written. And while sitting there autographing books, a demented black woman came up. The only question I heard from her was, "Are you Martin Luther King?" And I was looking down writing, and I said yes. And the next minute, I felt something beating on my chest. Before I knew it, I had been stabbed by this demented woman. I was rushed to Harlem Hospital. It was a dark Saturday afternoon. And that blade had gone through, and the x-rays revealed that the tip of the blade was on the edge of my aorta, the main artery. And once that's punctured, you're drowned in your own blood. That's the end of you. Yes. It came out in the New York Times the next morning that if I had merely sneezed, I would have died. Well, about 4 days later, they allowed me, after the operation, after my chest had been opened and the blade had been taken out, to move around in the wheelchair in the hospital. They allowed me to read some of the mail that came in, and from all over the states and the world, kind letters came in. I read a few, but one of them I will never forget. I had received one from the president and the vice president. I've forgotten what those telegrams said. I'd received a visit and a letter from the governor of New York, but I've forgotten what that letter said. Yes. But there was another letter that came from a little girl, a young girl, who was a student at the White Plains High School. And I looked at that letter, and I'll never forget it. It said simply, "Dear Dr. King, I am a 9th grade student at the White Plains High School." She said, "While it should not matter, I would like to mention that I'm a white girl. I read in the paper of your misfortune and of your suffering, and I read that if you had sneezed, you would have died. And I'm simply writing you to say that I'm so happy that you didn't sneeze. And I want to say tonight, that I too am happy that I didn't sneeze, because if I had sneezed, I wouldn't have been around here in 1960, when students all over the South started sitting in at lunch counters. And I knew that as they were sitting in, they were really standing up for the best in the American dream and taking the whole nation back to those great wells of democracy which were dug deep by the founding fathers in the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution. If I had sneezed, I wouldn't have been around here in 1961 when we decided to take a ride for freedom and ended segregation in interstate travel. If I had sneezed, I wouldn't have been around here in 1962 when Negroes in Albany, Georgia decided to straighten their backs up. And whenever men and women straighten their backs up, they are going somewhere, because a man can't ride your back unless it is bent. If I had sneezed, if I had sneezed, I wouldn't have been here in 1963. And the black people of Birmingham, Alabama, aroused the conscience of this nation and brought into being the Civil Rights Bill. If I had sneezed, I wouldn't have had a chance later that year in August to try to tell America about a dream that I had had. If I had sneezed, I wouldn't have been down in Selma, Alabama to see the great movement there. If I had sneezed, I wouldn't have been in Memphis to see a community rally around those brothers and sisters who are suffering. I'm so happy that I didn't sneeze. And they were telling me, now it doesn't matter now. It really doesn't matter what happens now. I left Atlanta this morning, and as we got started on the plane, there were 6 of us. The pilot said over the public address system, "We are sorry for the delay, but we have Dr. Martin Luther King on the plane, and to be sure that all of the bags were checked, and to be sure that nothing would be wrong on the plane. We had to check out everything carefully, and we've had the plane protected and guarded all night. And then I got into Memphis, and some began to say the threats, talk about the threats that were out. What would happen to me from some of our sick white brothers. Well, I don't know what will happen now. We've got some difficult days ahead, but it really doesn't matter with me now, because I've been to the mountaintop. I would like to live a long life. Longevity has its place. But I'm not concerned about that now. I just want to do God's will. And He's allowed me to go up to the mountain. And I've looked over and I've seen the promised land. I may not get there with you, but I want you to know tonight that we as a people will get to the promised land. So I'm happy tonight. I'm not worried about anything. I'm not fearing any man. Mine eyes have seen the glory of the coming of the Lord.
Dr. Martin Luther King, April 3rd, 1968. The night before he was assassinated in Memphis, Tennessee. The federal King holiday, which started in '83, was first observed in '86, has overlapped with Inauguration Day just 2 other times. First with Bill Clinton in 1997, and then again with President Obama in 2013. Obama also took his oath of office using a Bible that belonged to Dr. Martin Luther King. The King family has been extremely critical of President Trump, but the youngest of the civil rights leader's 4 children, Bernice King, said of Martin Luther King Day coinciding with the Trump inauguration, quote, "It's wonderful this occurs on the King holiday, the inauguration, because it reminds us of King," she said. You can see all of our Martin Luther King programs by going to democracynow.org. Special thanks to the Democracy Now! Team in Washington, D.C. Democracy Now! Is produced with Renee Feltz, Mike Burke, Dina Guzder, Messiah Rhodes, Nermeen Sheikh, Maria Tarasena, Tammy Warnoff, Trina Nadura, Sam Alkoff, Tamarie Astudio, John Hamilton, Ravi Karen, Hani Masood, and Hannah Elias. Our executive director is Julie Crosby. Special thanks to Becca Staley, John Randolph, Paul Powell, Mike DeFilippo, Miguel Noguera, Hugh Grand, Dennis Moynihan, David Prude, Dennis McCormick, Matt Ely, Anna Osbeck, Emily Anderson, Dante Turrieri, Buffy St. Marie Hernandez. To get a copy of our daily newsletter, you can go to democracynow.org and sign up, or text the word Democracy Now! To 66866. That does it for our show. Happy Dr. Martin Luther King Day. I'm Amy Goodman. Thanks so much for joining us.